Hello everybody, this is Krish Dunham. Today I thought I'd share with you a story about burden. And it's a story I just read today, but it had so much depth to it. I thought I would record it and present it in just its very raw form because I just heard it. Now the story is told about unburdening oneself, about cutting the strings that seem to tie us to a burden. Now here's how the story goes, and maybe we can unpack it a little bit, but try to keep the message short and sweet. Apparently there was a farmer who, while he was working in his fields, got trapped under a humongous stack or humongous pile that comprised of a great many bales of hay. Now, each strand of hay is not very heavy, as most of us know. A group of them put together, or strands put together, create this bundle, and the bundles are then compacted and made into a bale, and then the bales are stacked. And so as you travel through the world and as you go and watch different farmlands in operation, it is not uncommon to see the sight of either hay rolled up or hay cut and processed and made into bales that can be sent away for other purposes. Now back to our story about a man trapped under many bales of hay, screaming out for help. Along comes a stranger and says to him, "What can I do?" The man says, "I need help. I need to get out of here. Cut the strings." Not understanding what that meant, this solitary individual decides to try to move the burden. He's unable to do so. He makes every effort, and whether it is natural effort and supernatural effort or whatever it is, he failed. He scurries away and calls for help, and more help comes, and eventually 5 or 6 people come, and none of them are able to move the bales of hay. Eventually they get heavy equipment, and the heavy equipment, along with the form of joists and cranes, manages to lift that humongous pile from top of this man, who is extricated rather limply from that circumstance. But as he was pulling him out, they kept asking him the question. All through the process, you kept yelling, "Cut the strings," because that's all he could muster, cut the strings. And then he says, yeah, individually the bales of hay are quite heavy. Collectively they formed a mammoth load. But if you cut the strings that held those bales together, they would have fallen apart. And eventually, even if you cut the strings on a single bale, the hay would have scattered and you could have extricated me. As I read that story and the principles that it outlined, it's actually fairly simple. We have heard many such stories about if you break a twig, it's very easy, but if you put a collection of twigs together into a bundle and you rope it together, it's much harder to break. Same with strands. When you look at the marriage rope, and the rope is put together in many strands, and all of these illustrations come to the general conclusion that anything that is held together with great might takes great effort to pull it apart. But the principle of this story is quite different because it actually talks about the individual nature of burden. Every time we seem to go through the grasp of trying to understand what it is that debilitates us, what it is that kind of puts us in the corner, we seem to stack our burdens on top of each other, making the burden insurmountable, making the obstacle so unmountable or something that we cannot overcome because in our mind we have positioned it in such a way that it is so big. How then do we break the strings of our burden and make it relatively simple? How then do we try to take on this task of taking that huge load off of us? Many years ago, the cartoon that was quite famous, and I've shared this before, is the cartoon of a donkey. And the donkey has a stick in front of it, and at the end of the stick is a carrot. On the back of a donkey is a huge burden. And the logic of motivation was always that if the donkey finds the target, the carrot, appealing enough, if it finds the carrot sweet enough, if it finds the carrot satisfying enough, it will move towards the objective and as a result carry its load. While from a motivational standpoint, that's a beautiful story, we have reached a point where sometimes we have to shorten the stick, sweeten the carrot, lighten the load, and let the poor donkey take a bite. We are at a stage where the burdens that are on our back are so huge sometimes because they have been added and added and added. Whether you look at the burden of the pandemic, or you add on it the layer of unemployment, or you add on it the layer of hopelessness, or you add on it the layer of confinement, or you add on it the layer of not being able to meet with relatives and loved ones, or you add on it the layer of the elderly and the infirm that do not have access to us, or you add on it the reality of a global shutdown and the inability to transport yourself as some of us find ourselves away from our loved ones. The strands that keep tying those burdens seem to be growing and growing and growing. And the load is so much that not one person, not one solution, not one idea, not one concept, not even one vaccine can solve the hopelessness. The logic of that story made so much sense to me, saying maybe we just need to cut the strings. Maybe we need to cut the strings and ask ourselves, what can I do in isolation to deal with a disease? How can I protect myself and my family from contracting it? What can I do in a separate silo to ensure that my income streams are good and my sanity is protected because I'm investing into my mind that which is good, clean, pure, powerful, and positive? How can I now talk to my Father every day knowing that the distance is growing by the day because time is now passing us as He's in the twilight years of His life, wondering if something catastrophic could happen during this time and we never will be able to see each other. Some days, when I wake up, and I bet when you wake up, we find ourselves with all these bales, all these burdens, strapped together, strand by strand, string by string, to create this huge mammoth rock that is on top of us. And as a result of it, there is this great breathlessness. People who are walking by us, giving us advice, are saying, hey, can I help you? They're trying to lift the load by themselves. They're trying to give us suggestions by ourselves, but nothing seems to be working because we are yelling at the top of our lungs with absolute breathlessness. Cut the strings, cut the strings, cut the strings. So today, I hope this message will convince you to cut the strings, lighten the load, sweeten the carrot, and let yourself take a bite. God bless you.